Now, it's your turn.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, and welcome to this newest episode of the Amateur Otaku podcast. This is the first video in a series that we're going to be doing on the My Hero Academia Manga. We did a very long recording where we talked from chapters 387 all the way to 404, and we figured it was a nice time to take the entirety of these chapters and discuss them in sections to get everybody caught up with the manga after all the breaks, because now it looks like Horikoshi is on a nice stretch with taking fewer breaks than what he used to take in the past, and we're very excited with what's happening in the manga. On this first video, we do like a state of My Hero Academia. We talked about the state of the manga in where it's been, where it's going, and certain decisions that the author Kohei Horikoshi has made in developing this final war arc that we call the Battle for One for All, and we share our thoughts on it. So, thanks for joining us, and enjoy. Fear not, citizens, because hope has arrived, because the Amateur Otaku is back to talk My Hero Academia Manga, because the manga's on fire, so you gotta be, if you've read it. But at the same time, it's been a while since we've covered this. Horikoshi is really finding a way, or at least the plan that he had from the beginning is starting to show fruition to a point, because he's literally tying all the loose ends to give us an epic final battle against All for One. So a lot has happened. We got to talk about it. Mike, I only have one question before we start.
Shoot.
How do you feel after months of hearing me go, read it, damn it?
My Hero Academia, Brandon, you guys know this by now. This was my first anime. This is my first anime. So this series will always have a special place in my heart. And the reason we kind of dropped it, we're gonna play the sad violin, right? No, but the reason I dropped this series is because Horikoshi was taking a lot of breaks, and the pacing was a little bit weird. It was never really the content of the book itself. It's like, oh, this book sucks now. So finally getting back into it, reading pretty much 17 chapters straight for the last week. Like you were saying, we're seeing the bigger picture kind of come together. I'm still not a fan with some of the directions he's taking with some of these characters and plot lines, but it's really fascinating to see where the series has kind of gone from its inception. Because I've said it here before, My Hero Academia, the show that I fell in love with, doesn't exist anymore. It's a completely different series. Yeah. And that's for better sometimes, and sometimes for worse. So seeing it kind of develop over time, especially this last couple weeks, getting back into it, has been really exciting. I can't wait to see where he's going next, because he's been cooking the last few chapters, I will say.
Bro, he cooking all right. And it's crazy. I think it's a mixture of all the breaks, and also that he spread himself to so many, maybe one could say too many different areas, because there's a lot of stuff that he felt that he needed to wrap up before building to this moment, right? But like you said, because of the breaks, not necessarily because of the content, whether or not you like where he took certain characters, right? It felt that you lost touch with the main characters of the story that you feel carried most of the weight of the core story of the book.
One of the main characters of the book has been out of the story for a year. I'm just saying.
I don't know what you're trying to say. I have a feeling
Audio
Okay, he's
listeners,
not dead.
we just had the memorial for Katsuki Bakugo, you know, gone too soon.
By the way, that was me acknowledging Mike's frustration.
But also, we're 4 minutes into this. I assume you read the title, you saw the thumbnail. You should know that if you're aren't caught up on the manga, spoiler
This is
alert.
yes, you've seen the
Manga's been
thumbnail,
dead for a year. There you go.
right? Well, at least, I would say he's been mortally wounded for at least 3 months, and then he's been in the operating table for the last 9 months. And
Oh,
I think
man.
we just found out. I don't know what is it, almost 60 chapters later. We found out that he, I don't know, maybe made it out okay.
That's a
So
year's worth of
it's
chapters, by the way, not accounting for the breaks that they also took. That's my point.
Stop it.
But that's my point of like
Yeah.
Horikoshi.
Actually, it's been more than a year.
Yeah,
It's been more.
it has.
It's been more than a year.
That's so weird to sit on, especially because we do like the anime coverage with Jamie and like trying to make that not like, spoiler free for the anime watchers. Like it's been weird to sit on for like a year. But anyway, I think that kind of goes into some of the issues that I kind of had of like My Hero Academia at its core has always been about like Deku and All Might and him wanting to become the world's greatest hero. And it quickly, like Horikoshi's really good at making these supporting characters, right? Like Star and Stripe is in 5 chapters, but she is an iconic part of the story of My Hero Academia to this point, right? Like he's so good at introducing new characters and establishing their backstories. Like Isaac would always say that Shoto is one of his favorite characters, is his favorite character of the series, right? Hawks is one of my favorite characters of the series. And they're not like the main players of the story. So when you get to the end, she's like, I gotta wrap up all of these. And it's a bit messy. I think once it gets animated, like the anime can just be like, this batch of episodes is about Todoroki, and it's like 3 episodes and you're done. Whereas trying to plot that out and paste that out in the manga itself takes a bit more time. And it's a lot more work to try and make that come together smoothly. So overall, I think he did okay. If this series was like Naruto, for example, where it's just Naruto and Sasuke are the main characters, nobody else really matters, he may have been able to juggle it a bit more.
I appreciate that you say it nonchalantly, like nobody else matters.
The name of the book is Naruto. It's about Naruto. It's about Sasuke. That's part of the problem with Sakura as a character too. You know, it's not perfect, but like Kishimoto knew from the beginning, like,
what he wanted to do.
What he wanted to do with them. We love Shikamaru. Shikamaru's not a main character. You know, like, and he still gets a moment, but like Shikamaru gets one moment out of the entire book, really, to really stand out. Whereas My Hero, Horikoshi, made these characters, but then he was like, I want to develop Uraraka and Toga.
And I want to give all these characters some type of moment. I got to give them something that, and I get what you're saying, because it also kind of you see it it became exhausting to a point, because you kind of lose who you're supposed to follow, and like
there's gaps where we would be on this podcast and be like, Deku hasn't been here for 20 chapters, and it's like that's insane for your main character.
All you see is like a picture, right?
Yeah,
and you can go on a limb, right, and say, well, that being said, every character that we've seen grow through this whole war event is growing as a hero because of Deku's inspiration. You could say that because you do see that. That is a main factor. That is a main that's a thematic element that is palpable. And you know what I think about? I think this is very interesting. I never thought about it this way till we started diving in. I think before we get into the nitty-gritty of the actual content, I think this is a good conversation to have. It's funny because when one of the last times that we talked about, when we started talking about the battle for One for All, right? When it started coming out, we kind of started calling it like, this is the crisis of infinite Earths. This is the global event in My Hero Academia.
Right.
So what I find interesting now is, now that I see all those other events, right? it's like Horikoshi thought, well, I can't just come up with tie-ins to the event, so I have to create the tie-ins within the main book.
That's a great point, actually.
So, which again takes back the inspiration of My Hero, which is Western comic books
Yeah.
and media from Marvel, DC, and the main houses. And
If this was a crisis, it would be like Shoto's getting his own one shot, and it's off to the side, focusing on that.
getting his tie-in book, right?
Right.
And it's going to have the little header that's going to say the battle for all, one for all, and it's going to have the Shoto Todoroki, right? And it's funny because that's now that I see it, now that we're getting close, because one of the things that we talked about a lot here was that Horikoshi in the last, you see it, it's really actively happening in the last 20 chapters. He's literally closing loops and minimizing the battlefield because he's bringing back the focus to Deku, all for Shiggy, Ray for all. By the way, I call him Ray for all because he's using Ray's rewind and he's one, right? But like he's closing all those loops that would have been tie-ins. So it makes me think, what if there was a version of this where all those tie-ins were in the way and we can just focus, right?
Yeah.
It makes you think, could that have been a more successful approach? Which definitely it could have been. But at the same time, I think one of the reasons why I enjoy it and forgive it so much is because it's not like the Naruto fillers where we're supposed to care or want to see these characters that we've only seen once and actually care about what goes about their day or the mini crisis that they're facing, because all these characters have a weight and have actually just have justifiable weight throughout the whole history of the book.
I would
So-
also add to that though, of like it's not it's not nearly as egregious as like the Naruto fillers, right? And like
It's not.
knowing
It's not at all.
firsthand context for everybody, like we just published a Naruto filler guide for Collider.
Yes, you did.
Like the exact
Yes, you
this
did.
exact day of recording.
Naruto pace.
Yeah, and so one thing I've noticed with Naruto is that if you skip the filler, you get straight into the next arc or the continuation of the current arc that you're already on. So it's like you don't miss anything by missing the fillers. And I think what's interesting about how Horikoshi is pacing this out is that you can kind of do that with the manga. Like if you want to just speed run Deku's journey,
Yes.
you go from when Ed Shot and Bakugo have that moment a year ago, and you just jump back to every time Deku appears on screen. You feel like you miss nothing.
Right.
On the page, I should say, because it's a book, not anime. But you get the point. So in that sense, it does very much feel like these are tie-ins or filler type of issues, because you can cut them out and like the grand narrative of Deku's journey and his fight with All For
It's still
One
there.
is still
there.
100% intact, which I think is that also might be a detriment a little bit too, because like maybe if you did weave in Deku a bit more into that main story, like instead of having 10 straight chapters of the Todorokis with no mention of Deku, you flash back to him in his battle with Shigaraki once in a while. That might be a nitpick though, because again,
and there's no text. It's just a panel. Like you really don't. Yeah.
So I like it. It's one of those things again where that's the benefit and also the detriment of writing a manga, right? We always talk about manga versus comics and how comics are too convoluted and how they're too hard to follow and too hard to get into. Manga has a lot of strength, but this is also probably just one of the weaknesses of the medium, where we even say this with Attack on Titan, right? Where it's written down and it doesn't really come across the way the writer may have intended it to. But once it gets animated and you get the score and you get the music swelling up and you're able to spend 2 minutes on a fight instead of 5 pages on a fight, taking up a quarter of the issue, it may come together a bit more. And I think much like the mangaka for Attack on Titan, Horikoshi has started writing My Hero Academia for the anime more than the book itself sometimes. Like some of the references he puts in are clear, direct references to filler episodes, making them canon, or to the movies, which we thought weren't canon, but they actually are canon. So it's like Horikoshi's writing My Hero Academia, the franchise, not just the manga. So like sometimes
Right.
I think he's thinking a little too far ahead of like, Star and Stripe would be a really cool character in the anime because those quirks are they're gonna make Studio Bones cry next season, you know?
No, they're crying as we speak.
Yeah. They're working on it right now, probably, and they're like, "What are we doing
Yeah.
here?"
It's like they're like this month. They're literally like grinding their teeth. They feel like Mappa. So yeah, but yeah, it's one of those things. Like I'm glad that you mentioned the whole thing about how it can be detrimental because it makes you think that's the crux of an author.
Yeah.
He has to choose what he's doing. So I think I appreciate Horikoshi because he did set out to do it this way, and he's really doing the work. Whether it's appealing or acceptable for everybody, that's it depends on the reader. I personally don't mind it as much because I like as much content as possible, but I do see how legitimate are all the claims like the ones that you make that it wasn't something that really is helping the story. It makes me think what would happen if how will they approach it on the anime? Will they do the same thing? Will they make the same decisions? Or like we've seen in the last couple of seasons, are we going to move things around to create more narrative sense? Which
Yeah.
it's I think it's also the whole debate of these authors saying the anime is going to be my definitive version, my director's cut, which
Right.
is funny because they're actively writing it. But
I think to answer just that question of the anime, it very much might be what they did with season 5, where they moved the Endeavor Agency and My Villain Academia around. So instead of getting Todoroki's story and then Uraraka's story back to back, it might be Todoroki cut back to Deku, stop when Bakugo wakes up, cuts back to Uraraka. It's because
yeah,
I feel like the anime wants to keep Deku in the story as much as possible, which is why they
I would
moved My
assume so.
Villain
Yes,
Academia around.
yes,
So
agreed,
yeah, I would
agreed.
expect that.
Thank you for joining us for this week's Amateur Otaku podcast, and I hope that you enjoyed our thoughts on the state of the My Hero Academia manga and the battle for One for All and everything that Kohei is bringing together as he brings us closer to the final moments of this amazing book that we all love, which is My Hero Academia. Next week, stay tuned because we will be talking about the Fall of the House of Todoroki Part 4, which will cover from chapters 387 to 390. We'll see you next week. Have it awesome, guys. Peace.